So I think of Ksanti as having sort of three dimensions. This is not the way it's talked about in the traditional teachings, but there's no exact translation for Ksanti, single word exact translation, like so many things that we encounter. But it has the quality of patience, it has the quality of forbearance, and it has the quality of tolerance. So patience when we're obstructed in some way, for example, or when we have something that we're trying to do, but we can't get to it. And tolerance is our acceptance, our deep acceptance of others and their differences from our ways of thinking and our ways of knowing things. And forbearance is the ability to tolerate your own suffering and the more general suffering that we encounter, that is the first noble truth, which we see at the personal level, at the relational level, and at this larger social level, level of society. So again, I'm going to draw on Dale Wright because he's got such a lovely way of putting things. And first of all, he says, when we understand all things, especially ourselves, as constituted through relations to others, the larger issue of identity begins to take on a new look. And along with it, the kinds of moral questions that will be posed. Seen from an ideal of the Bodhisattva image, those who are hungry will be fed, not because it's the Bodhisattva's duty to feed them, or that they have a right to be fed, but rather because of a sense of common belonging and shared identity, so fundamental that a compassionate response becomes natural. So he says, he gives a definition, and then he talks about the opposites that help us understand the definition. He says, Ksanti means unaffected by, able to bear, able to withstand. And in that dimension indicates a strength of character, a composure, and a constancy of purpose that allow a bodhisattva to continue pursuing enlightenment in spite of enormous difficulty. Emphasizing that basic dimension, this third perfection could also be translated as the perfection of endurance or the perfection of composure. Bodhisattvas who have trained in this virtue are imperturbably and well-composed, calm and focused in the midst of adversity. Through deliberate self-cultivation, they build the capacity to withstand danger, suffering, and injustice, to resist the onslaught of negative emotions, and to think clearly under the stress of turmoil. They attain an admirable constancy that, even in the face of enormous opposition, equips them to move effectively when others have been overwhelmed. So he's going to give then the sort of the counter to this. He says, Buddhist texts counterpose this strength of character to a range of character weaknesses. The tendency to lose focus, to become fearful, to react in anger to abuses or slights that injure the ego or body, as well as to yield to the temptations of surrender and despair. Mentally unaffected by abuse or danger, the ideal bodhisattva conserves his or her energy for positive steps toward awakening and is not overwhelmed by the self-destructive temptations of fearfulness and surrender, anger and retaliation. Self-controlled and powerful in composure, the bodhisattva maintains the stability and presence of mind to make the best possible move in a wide range of situations. Whereas tolerance and patience are often interpreted as forms of passivity or weaknesses, the perfection of tolerance is thought to generate a remarkable power. That well said. Yeah. So, and it's invigorating, right? We can't give in to the temptation of despair or fearfulness or surrender. So, so he talks about these three aspects, the threefold division of this paramita into one, the capacity to tolerate all forms of personal suffering. I'm sick, I wrenched my ankle, personal suffering. 2, the capacity to tolerate injuries of body and ego caused by others. And 3, and this one I think is particularly relevant to us today because of the kinds of shocks our system has received, right? 3, the capacity to tolerate more comprehensive visions of reality that undermine long-standing habits of mental insecurity. So we have these long-standing beliefs that the way things are is the way they're always going to continue to be, right? And to get a more comprehensive vision of reality includes more of what's actually happening, what's really the state of things, condition of things. So it's obvious that this could lead you to believe, this particular paramita, I think, could lead you to believe that there's some virtue in passivity, being just accepting whatever comes, going with the flow, and that is distinctly not what we're talking about here. But I think there's a lot to appreciate about this capacity to have enough composure to discover what's the appropriate response, what's the appropriate action to take in the situation, what's the appropriate thing to say. And to do that, we have to be grounded, right? We have to have this, this composure. So meanwhile, we're facing a lot of injustice, we're facing a lot of cruelty and institutionalized cruelty that tests our capacity to hold this quality of composure, right? And so it's not that everything is to be tolerated. It's really clear that not everything is to be tolerated. However, we have to work on our capacity to meet things with enough presence of mind that what we do doesn't make things worse for ourselves or for others. So this sense of getting a more comprehensive sense of reality is really important to that. Dale Wright says, all Buddhist philosophical writing comes down to this final version, the capacity to tolerate or face what is ultimately true about oneself and the world. This, the classic texts maintain, is extremely difficult. First of all, because all we ever get is a partial view, right? We all live by means of a variety of rationalizations, explanations that we provide for ourselves or that society provides for us, that blunt the sharp edge of reality and soften the impact of the truth. The perfection of tolerance is, finally, the ability to see what emerges as it is without turning back in fear and trembling. So it's tough medicine, right? It's really, this paramita really asks a lot of us in terms of our training. So he asks the question, and we have to ask ourselves the question, are there limits to tolerance? Are there limits? If the perfection of tolerance is not a condition of ethical neutrality, a state of non-judgment or lack of conviction, then we might begin to give it substance with a formula like this, really like this. The perfection of tolerance is the art of understanding what, when, and how to tolerate. Shaped this way, tolerance would necessarily be guided by a thought of enlightenment and by a profound conviction that all human beings deserve to live under conditions that will allow them the pursuit of happiness. The goal of tolerance would be to generate and preserve those conditions. It would not include passively allowing these conditions to be violated. Therefore, nothing should be tolerated that would undermine the conditions human beings need to lead free and worthwhile lives. Tolerating injustice to others, or tolerating pointless suffering that could be prevented, these are not tolerance at all. In fact, they may be forms of immoral neglect and cruelty. So, again, it's kind of a rich understanding of this seemingly quite simple paramita, capacity to abide, tolerating, and forbearing suffering in ourselves and others. But we have a very different view about what we're willing to tolerate for ourselves and what we're willing to witness others do to others, right? So if you have a child, you feel quite differently watching someone be cruel to your child than, how much should you tolerate? And this is where wisdom comes in, and wisdom is absolutely essential for each one of the paramitas, of course. We're going to talk about wisdom on Saturday, but it has to permeate back through all of these paramitas. And also, these paramitas also work forward. You begin to see how tolerance is a function of generosity and morality, right? It's the unfolding of that in real lived experience. So, we want to be aware that we can have this tendency to feel overwhelmed and despairing. And this particular paramita is our work against those kind of destructive, self-destructive tendencies. Okay, but we want to have a chance to talk with Nelly. And Nelly she of course wins the award for traveling the farthest of anyone in Spain, and has been such a profound and powerful presence online, in our online Dharma Sangha, and has this deep practice background. So Nelly has actually been ordained and has a deep practice with different sanghas, and has experienced much of the need for patience. And I've been wondering, given your life circumstances, you've had to face a lot of difficulties and challenges to your patience and your tolerance. And I'm just wondering if this is something that's changed for you over time, your understanding of this.
I was actually thinking that practice supported me a lot in that. But I also realized that I had a great example from my parents, actually, who have faced a lot of adversity. And in each situation, and it moves me to share about that, really were very courageous and made a lot of efforts to face the adversity and do what was best. And there was a lot of care also for the family, for friends, for neighbors. So I realized how much, since childhood, I had this example of, just acknowledging what's happening, and it's difficult, but then what can we do to face that and to care for this situation in the best way? So I guess this was a great example for me. And I think practice supported me a lot also in that, like first accepting when something is happening, just acknowledging, okay, this is what's happening. Not, turning away from it, but really acknowledging this is what happens. And then what can I do in this situation? And noticing also what's happening inside me. Are the emotions that are arising really linked to this situation, or are they things from the past that make me maybe overreact to what's really happening? And I think I'm very grateful that you and Flint have brought Hakomi and IFS into our practice, because I realized that it really deepened my practice in that way, because maybe in the past practice supported me a lot, but maybe there was some kind of spiritual bypassing around some things. In these years in which I've practiced at Appamada and trained in Akomi and IFS, I've realized, oh my God, there are all these parts inside me that carry so much pain here still. So it allowed me to do a lot of healing, and now being able to discern more in each situation what's happening. And I see also, I think something that supports me a lot in whatever situation is really considering it as a practice opportunity. Like in each situation, I can learn from what's happening. I can learn, So this also gives some space to be able to attend the situation more appropriately. And then I think curiosity and compassion are really key also in that. Compassion for myself also when these emotions come up, and maybe, I do also some mistakes, but then what can I do when I do mistakes? And then there are things that we can do also. And starting from that compassion towards my parts also supported me in being more compassionate towards others when they also do mistakes, or when they're blended with parts and behave in a way that can also impact others or myself. And I think connecting also with karma, in each moment, all the causes and conditions that brought me to this moment make me act in a way. And that's the fact for everyone. And so acknowledging that supports me in also having compassion for others when they do things that might be hurtful sometimes. And that doesn't mean that to be passive. So I've always tried to see, and I think practice supports me in deeply connecting, as much as possible with that non-separation between subject and object, that really Buddha nature includes everything, and that's what we really are. So then there is that care for Buddha nature that comes up, and that's care for everything. So in every situation, how can I care for the person in the relationship, for myself, and for all the elements in the situation. So there is something around that. And I guess something very important for me has been also an exploration around self-care, and that's something I started to deeply focus on before I started to practice, because I was really working too much at a certain point, and I was working with kids, and that's how much, if I wasn't taking enough care of myself, how much it was more difficult to be emotionally regulated, and then that created impacts. So I've done some work before starting to practice to really be more mindful about that. But it can be challenging because, I think that's a constant practice also to really explore what we need to be nourished enough and have enough capacity to be able to face whatever happens to us. So I try to be very mindful about that, and that's also linked with boundaries, being able to discern how much we can take or do, how we can express our boundaries in an appropriate way also to others. So anyway, there are so many aspects in this.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that there are internal aspects. You're talking about the parts inside, and our feelings and emotions, our sense of overwhelm, our thoughts and stories about what's happening. Then there's this external, how we actually appear, speak, act, and move in the world, what we actually do. And then there's the relational aspect, where it's how this connection is playing out. And then there's this larger communal sense is like, what kind of society do we want to have? What kind of community do we want to have? And how do we want that to, how we want that to reflect our Buddhist, understanding, our both our ethical foundations, but also our bodhisattva vow, our aspiration and intention. And so I think that's really, you've faced this in your family, in your workplace, and in your sanghas.
Yes.
So
And there is still grief around that. I mean, there were complex situations, and I had to make the choice to step back from sanghas with spiritual friends I deeply loved and teachers I appreciated a lot and I learned a lot from. But then I think discernment is very important. Like, I think being grounded really in Buddha nature and what feels appropriate to me, and discern how to navigate that, which is very challenging. And really discovering right use of power for me was wow, because there were some things I was doing intuitively, but then the right use of power framework really gave me a way to better understand the power dynamics that can happen.
and to communicate about them.
Communicate about them, and having the vocabulary, and then having tools also to navigate even more skillfully. So I'm very passionate about that, and happy. I think there is a huge need of that also, to be able to support each other in how to navigate these complex situations.
And now you've become a teacher of right use of power.
Yes, yes. I'm very so grateful. Yeah. I think gratitude is a big part of it also. Whatever I'm facing, there are always aspects I can be grateful for. I mean, there is so much beauty in the world and wonderful people in the world, and also so many dear friends and family members who have been supporting me throughout the time. I think also one aspect was also seeking for support, and being able to seek for support. That really helped me. Being accompanied.
When you can find that support, you're nourished in ways that make you able to hold your composure more. Everything is very, we're social animals, so everything's viral, like fear is viral, and anxiety is viral, and depression is viral, and so is calm. So is that composure that can hold off on some urgent action. This is the patience part of it, in order to really see what is going to be most appropriate here, in order to really feel your way into it. It's not an intellectual exercise. It's much more of that felt sense, and that's what you're really demonstrating, is how much this felt sense impacts what we do and our relationships with other people. Right? Yeah. So it's so helpful. Yeah. So I just want to do a time check really quick.
8:12.
Oh, good. Okay. So we're in good shape, right? I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about how there's also kind of an arc. Like when I was younger, I was extremely impatient. Extremely impatient. I wanted to go fast, and I wanted obstacles out of the way. So everything that was in the way was annoying. And for most of my life, faster meant better. Doing something faster, being able to accomplish something faster, getting through things faster. And I think probably it was sewing the Rakusu that actually revealed to me that going faster wasn't the appropriate way to handle a Rakusu, although I have sewn some pretty fast when I needed to. But I think I have an appreciation now for this reduction in the sense of urgency, which is fueled by our society, right? And fed by all these, all of these programs for greater productivity, and where you have, you do time logs and things like that, make sure that you're being efficient with the use of your time, and people are really striving to be more productive. And I think there's that strain in our society of this sort of self-improvement and do it faster, and to get rid of obstacles. Obstacles are to be overcome somehow, tossed to the side, or doesn't matter to a person, or And so I think I've come to have more of an appreciation for the fact that almost nothing is brain surgery that's an emergency. Almost nothing. There's a real benefit in slowing your mind down, which is what happens in practice, reducing that sense of sort of reactive urgency that gets ramped up. We've got to do something about this, and we have to do something about it now, and a willingness to take a look at the larger picture and not get so focused on the thing I'm trying to speed through. So I think that's probably one of the gifts of aging, is that you develop the capacity to calm some of that, which, for me was fueled a lot by anxiety, and you see that sense of urgency is really a sense of anxiety. So this particular paramita was one of my biggest struggles, actually, and the butt-headed things other people were doing, and their stupidity, and why don't they get over it? When I was much younger, that was a big feature of my thinking. So I think this is one of the things that with practice we learn to hold things in a different way, and to understand. I was looking at my sister's household is totally chaotic. She's got 3 grandchildren living with her son and daughter-in-law, and it's total chaos. And from the moment you walk in the door, and there's a half-finished Afghan, and there's a bag of trash that's halfway to the door, and everything's like sort of half done, There's half a snowflake cut out on the table. And I realized, my sister has a much better sense of priorities than I do, because she will stop whatever she is doing if anyone needs to talk about anything. If anybody is upset or distressed about anything, or they really have to ask her advice, or it's put aside, and now we are completely absorbed in our relationship. And I just admire that so much. You could make judgments about the housekeeping quality, but you have to recognize, this is a person who made this priority, right? And she has the patience to sit with someone. Other things, are cooking on the stove or whatever. There's the patience to sit with someone and really hear them, really listen to them, really attend to them. And this is another part of this quality. We tend to believe that we already know what somebody's going to say, or that we know what they're upset about, or, and because we can speed things up, oh yeah, okay, so you're upset about this, okay, all right, well, here's what you need to do about that, like this is our mode sometimes, like how they're gonna just go on and on and on like this. I've got to cut to the chase. And so I think it's always been a sort of model for me of the capacity to stop, hold the person in your awareness, and not be diverted, and your attention not be diverted. And there's a gift in that, right? There's a real gift, a genuine gift. So, what are you?
8:18.
8:18, okay. All right. Is there anything you would like to wrap up with? Anything last words?
I was just thinking of what you were just mentioning, also that sometimes processes need their own time, and I have noticed that sometimes I have parts of me that want to go faster than process time, and just acknowledging that there is some kind of release and really settling, and just, actually this process takes time, so I'm gonna let that time happen. And there is something very grounding.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing what your experience with this paramita is today. It's
My pleasure.
It's
Thank
very
you.
enlivening.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we need to stop for service. So let's get set up for service. Thank you so much.